Who can actually buy Bitcoin ETFs? We are going to tackle this question today, and I'm going to explain to you the key differences between ETFs, ETPs, and ETNs, and why Bitcoin itself is potentially the better choice. But first, before we get going, some housekeeping. We need to differentiate what ETFs, ETPs, and ETNs are. Generally speaking, since the introduction of the spot Bitcoin ETF in the US, we've seen an increased interest by institutions and Wall Street in these products. ETFs stand for Exchange Traded Funds, and they enable you to either invest in a sector and a basket of different stocks, companies, or also other things such as bonds. And they allow you to buy shares into that ETF. So you don't have to buy all the stocks or all the bonds or anything like that. You can just simply buy shares into that product and therefore profit from the utilized, I would say, returns you can get out of it. This simplifies investing for a lot of people. They don't have to deal with earnings reports or anything of these. They just look at the ETF data. ETNs and ETPs, on the other hand, are the exact same thing. The only difference is in the jurisdictional A, location, and B, the way they are being dealt in a potential bankruptcy. ETFs are outside of the liquidation mass if a business goes down, if there is a bankruptcy. And ETNs and ETPs are more cumbersome to deal with because they are either part of debt obligation, as you can see with ETNs, or the ETPs mainly as an investor mean for you that if the company that issues these ETPs has issues in a bankruptcy, you need to actually deal with the liquidation system and the way that authorities are dealing that process. However, in terms of investment, it's the exact same thing. You buy shares into ETNs and ETPs just as you do with ETFs. But what are the key differences and why is it so important for investors to look at Bitcoin ETFs? The spot Bitcoin ETFs differentiate themselves from the futures ETFs, which have been around, by actually needing to back whatever part of shares you buy with Bitcoin, and you're tracking the underlying asset, in this case Bitcoin, with the price. Meaning, if you buy shares worth 112,000 today, the issuer of that fund would actually need to also buy 1 Bitcoin to back the amount of shares and money you buy. You can then go in and out into these products and buy and sell your shares, obviously tracking the price development of Bitcoin. And you don't need to deal with the, let's call it technical hurdles of Bitcoin itself. All you do is you call your wiring house or your broker who is actually managing these platforms and these shares for you, and you can then determine if you buy or sell. This makes it very attractive, especially for institutions if they want to follow set asset and if they want to allocate but don't want the risks, in this case of Bitcoin, with the technical hurdles, and generally speaking also for jurisdictions where it's not maybe possible to buy Bitcoin. However, just because the spot Bitcoin ETFs in the US exist, and they really are a powerhouse now, doesn't mean that every investor in every market can invest in this. Investors in Switzerland, for example, have the luxury with certain platforms to actually buy shares into these ETFs. But investors from other countries have to adapt to either Bitcoin ETPs or Bitcoin ETNs who are also backing their shares with Bitcoin. Again, the only difference is in how these shares would actually be mitigated in terms of a bankruptcy. But the good thing is ETP issuers can also mitigate that risk by actually using custodians for their Bitcoin and different entities. But why would now someone buy an ETF, an ETP, or an ETN rather than actually spot Bitcoin? The key difference is, again, known environment. They already know and invest into ETFs, ETPs, or ETNs. And obviously also the environment their maybe firm or their personal choice is set up in. And the ETFs come with some significant advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are you can track the price of Bitcoin just as you could if you hold Bitcoin. So it's appealing for investors who want to opportunize the growth of Bitcoin. And on the other hand, where they are better than Bitcoin are the costs. You mainly have a managing fee for the issuing house that is actually giving you opportunity to invest in Bitcoin. And you don't have to deal with network transaction fees, just as you would do with Bitcoin. However, where the real kicker is why Bitcoin is better than that is obviously in the ownership. You outright control the Bitcoin you own. With the ETFs, you always have to rely on that third party, the issuer. You can also, through that ownership, be censorship resistant because you can do with your Bitcoin what you want. If there are any issues suddenly with your jurisdiction at the ETF issuer, it could be that they actually block access to that account, that they cash out for you and give you your investment returns back. Additionally, I can use Bitcoin to pay for things all around the world. I don't have to ask for permission. You cannot buy that with ETF shares. I cannot go to the coffee shop and say, I want a coffee and here are my shares. That, on the other hand, works with Bitcoin. And lastly is the liquidity and trading access. I can actually buy and sell Bitcoin 24/7, 365, as long as I found a counterparty who's willing to take up that trade. With the ETFs, you're stuck to the regular business hours from Monday to Friday, just as you see in capital markets. Now, we've established there are certain types of investors who prefer the ETPs, maybe because they don't want to deal with the tech stuff. They want to actually invest in a known environment. However, we at Relai are under the impression that it's probably better to own Bitcoin outright. And there is a very simple way, just as you can do with an ETF. If you want to buy shares, you can buy fractions of Bitcoin with a Bitcoin platform that enables you to actually also hold it in your own wallet. And you don't need to look further than the Relai app or us at Relai, because we are happy to help you out there. That's the end of the video. I'm interested to know if you have maybe looked at the ETFs, ETPs, or ETNs, and if you're interested in actually finding out more about the matter. If you do, leave me a comment below, or if you just want to say hi, you can do this also. And if you haven't yet, please also subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss another update. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I wish you the best of days.